Well, welcome to all of our participants in our September 16th edition of our Lunch and Learn. We appreciate your interest in our topic today. So once again, thank you for being here. I'm Gary Sechrist with KASB Leader Services. We also have with us today Sam Blasi, who is one of our attorneys. So, hey, thanks for waving at us, Sam. Good to see you again. We have a special program that we are very happy to announce to you. We have 3 superintendents and a board member representative that will speak to you about the hybrid model that they have chose to use within their school. We have with us today Mr. Kevin Case from Emporia. We have Dr. Ben Proctor from Heston and Dr. Chad Higgins from Mays. We're also fortunate to have a board representative from Heston, Mr. Lane Frick. So hopefully he'll participate and be allowed to speak. We do have some superintendents. So Lane, you may have to work hard to get in there, but we'll try to do that. What I'd like our participants to do at this particular point, if you would get in the chat, and hopefully you know the answer to this particular question, but with your name, obviously that will come up. But is your school presently using on-site, which everybody is in your building, predominantly in your buildings? Are you using the hybrid learning environment, or are you using a remote? So I'll give you an opportunity to write that in, and then as soon as we have some appropriate wait time, then we'll have our first speaker begin. Okay, looks like many of you have already responded to that. Interesting. Hopefully you can all see that. There's obviously the 3 learning environments, but it looks like there's some customized version depending on what your districts have. Our format today will be each of the superintendents and board member will be given an opportunity to speak about their model and how it may be pertinent to their students, staff, and their own communities. If you have a question, as usual, please put it in the chat. If we catch a brief moment of time, we will try to get that question asked. If it's specific to an individual superintendent, you might put their name in that so that we'll know that it gets to the right person. If not, we'll just start right now. So Mr. Kevin Case, a good friend of mine, I can say that I really appreciate all these superintendents, known them for a very long time. But Mr. Case, Superintendent of Emporia, would you be willing to share your model that you have in Emporia?
Definitely, Gary. Thank you. I just want to start out with a thank you to all of our board members. Wow, it's been an interesting ride, and we appreciate all the work that you're doing to help us and all of our communities, given the times we're in. So I want to share a little bit about kind of how we're approaching things in Emporia. Start with just some basic demographic information. We have about 4,700 students. We have about 27 or 2,800 of our kids are on free or reduced lunches. About 44% of our kids are on free lunch. We're 45% white, and about 46% of our population is Hispanic. And we have about 24% ESOL, and about 14% of our students receive special education services. So I think from that's one of the perspectives I'm probably going to spend more time on, just the importance of that piece. I'd also just tell you right now, if you're into the gating criteria piece, or if you're looking at that, our 2-week incident rate is in red, and our positive test rate is kind of in the yellow. So we're kind of in that mode where we've got a lot of cases popping up here in Lyon County. So I think that plays a part in all of what we're doing. One of the things that our board said as we started coming to them and saying, here's what we think how we need to start the school year, one of the things our board talked to us about a great deal was this concept of let's start in a more cautious zone, given the way where our community is. Let's start a little bit more cautiously, and then let's open. I think they use the term, let's open once, and let's do it right, and let's do it well. So you'll see, I don't know everybody else's model. I know a little bit about what Chad's doing but at Mays, but I will tell you our model will probably be more conservative than that, and part of that has to do with our community spread. So I think one of the pieces that when we sent this to our principals, one of the pieces that they really helped they really developed the nuts and bolts of the model that we're in. And then we went to our staff and we gathered input from our staff after we got some kind of basic pieces put in place. And so one of the pieces that I think was really important at the district level is we developed a spreadsheet of what we called at-risk indicators. And Gary's going to share a document that has some information about just some pieces of information that'll be helpful on how we developed them. But as we looked at those at-risk indicators, we looked at a number of things. We looked at test scores. So we looked at students' MAP scores for two different school years. And so if they were performing below grade level, they got flagged as one at-risk indicator. We also looked at average daily attendance. So we really took that chronic absenteeism piece into account, and we said anybody below 90% attendance rate, they also were flagged. We also looked at any of our students who had disabilities. We looked at our students who are ELL. We looked at our homeless students, our migrant students, and then an additional two that we added outside that spreadsheet was no internet, students with no internet. And some of those are just, they don't have the resources to get internet. And another is we actually have some homes who cannot get internet from any provider. And then the other one had to do with our social emotional and kind of that piece of where they stood there. So all of our principals received a spreadsheet for their building with all of these indicators in it, and then they started to prioritize students based on the number of at-risk indicators they had, but there was also input that went into that based upon some other factors with counselors. So I would also say that a lot of what we have done in talking with number of superintendents, a lot of what we have done is in collaboration with Lyon County Public Health. We have a really strong relationship with Public Health. We meet with them once a week. Some of our staff meet with them twice a week. So that has been a key piece in helping us to move forward. Right now, I'm not going to talk about our elementary model, but I'm going to just share what we're doing. At our elementary model, our board also believed parent choice was important. So allowing our parents to at least choose, do you want to be on site for some amount of time? It was hard for us to define that because we didn't know where we were going to be, but do you want to be on site at least whatever's possible, or do you want to be remote? So we have about 25% of our students in remote. At the elementary, that equates to 24 classrooms. So we have 24 remote classrooms at the elementary level, and then we have the remainder of our students at the elementary are on site in person, and we're trying to cohort those groups 5 days a week with 15 or under as kind of in that Kansas KSDE's gating criteria. So that's where we're at with the elementary. Our secondary developed what they have called a STEP approach, and so we have a group of students that are on site every day, and those are those at-risk or high-need students that we talked about. And so in our middle school and high school, we have about 980 kids in our middle school and about 1,200 kids in our high school. I think the thing you also have to take into account is the number of adults in those buildings. So if you just take our high school, we have probably about 160 to 170 employees in that building. So if you take that plus another 130, we're already at 300 kids in that building and trying to figure out how we social distance and do all of those things. So what they did is they created a step plan that said, we're going to bring in kids. We're going to divide the remaining students into 8 groups, 12.5%, if you will. So right now, we have a group of kids that'll come in, one 12.5% group, which actually is A through C last names, and they come in on Monday, and then the next 12.5% come in on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Friday's more of a hybrid or at-home day, and then we do the same thing the next week. So the step plan then says if things are going well, we're watching our attendance rate with students, we're monitoring our staff health, our student health, and our community health. If things are going well, then we will combine and go to step 2. Step 2 will be 1 day on site. But again, keep in mind, these are the students that are stepping in are students that are not deemed our highest needs students. So we really felt that our highest needs students needed to be on site every day. And that list continues to grow. We also are finding that we have a lot of parents now who are feeling their kids need to be on campus more. So we're getting pressure right now for kids to, well, my kid needs to be on campus every day. So one of the things we're struggling with right now, I'll use the word struggle, that's a strong word, but one of the things that we're discussing is how do we best add to that group, and what does that look like? So our goal was to achieve success and make sure that whatever we started with, we could maintain over time. And then our students who are at home on a daily basis are getting synchronous learning from the classroom. And I would just say that continues to be a challenge. One of our challenges is with our Chromebooks. We're finding our Chromebooks don't have the power that we wish they had, but we're making it work. We've also doubled our internet size, our pipe coming in. And right now we're finding that to be sufficient, but I believe that's going to be another challenge on down the road. And my quick story is we were starting school the 2nd of September. On September 1st, I received a phone call from our IT director at 7:30 in the evening saying we had no internet at any of our buildings. So we were meeting to possibly postpone the first day of school. And at 9 o'clock, it all came back on. So it seemed like one of many hoops that we were able to overcome. And I would just say that I have a great board that I work with, and we have a great, awesome group of staff here at Emporia. And I can't take credit for much of what I shared. Our building principals, our central office staff, our people in teaching and learning, everyone here has a role to play, and they know what that role is, and they did a great job of putting this plan together. So I would be happy to answer any questions, or I'm also gonna, I was told I had 10 minutes, so I have a clock running, and I think I'm actually under it, and I'm sure our other two distinguished panelists pick up on that time if need be.
Kevin, this is Gary. We do have a question, but I want to ask something first before, and this question could go to any one of the three superintendents and maybe even the board member that we've asked specially to be on. But do you mentioned about some parents wishing their child to be on site. You said you are, use a strong verb, struggling, but are you trying to come up with some protocols on how do you make the decisions on who gets to be on site and who not, Mr. Case?
Yeah, so our biggest challenge right now is we have told parents trimester, you can switch in and out at trimester. Our biggest challenge right now is enrollment. We enroll kids every day. I think this is, and you know, different perspectives. I came from Inman, was there 17 years, and we enrolled a kid every 2 or 3 weeks. In Emporia, we enroll 20 kids a day. Some days, every day we enroll kids. And so what we're having to deal with right now is I have a 5th grader and I'm enrolling at William Allen White, and we already have 15 in that class. So this is one of the challenges. Actually, as we're speaking here, there's a flow chart being developed on that we met on yesterday to say, what are we going to do when you come in and we don't have space for you, because it disrupts our cohorting and it puts too many kids in our classrooms. So what we're proposing to principals tomorrow is that you will actually, if you come in and your class is full in your home school, we'll allow you to go to another building that has space. So that in itself is going to be a challenge for us. So.
All right, thank you, Kevin. I do have a question here, and any of the superintendents can answer, but honestly, if Mr. Frick from Heston board member would be willing to answer this. Board member Kathy says, how are you handling the mask issue within your district? She and her particular district as a board member, she stated, is getting hammered for this. So I'm going to give Mr. Frick first opportunity, but if he chooses not to, we'll see if a superintendent would jump in.
Yeah, that's an interesting conversation, and one we've had, I would say, pretty regularly. We try to make it, very objective and not subjective or political, where we're following the guidance of not only the state, but then also our county. And so we put just a pretty hard rule in that if you're going to be on campus, you need to wear a mask. And of course, we've received, and Mr. Proctor can speak of this, we've received complaints and even parents who have said, you know, I'm not going to send my kid to school if you're requiring them to wear masks. And you hear it on the other end, I'm not going to send my kid to school if you don't require masks. So we just have tried to kind of take that on from a high level, that if you're on campus, wear a mask. Our teachers are trying to give, you know, students breaks and things like that at the appropriate times. But Mr. Proctor can probably speak on the specific examples of some of those cases or complaints that we've heard.
Thank you, Mr. Frick. We do have a question that I would like maybe the three superintendents would be able to answer. And board members, if you would like to answer this on chat, are all of your elementary students in person? First part of the question. And the second part is, did you have to add staff to get the small cohort? So if you're able to answer that, obviously our three superintendents, I hope you would be able to answer that. But other board members, it might be helpful that we get a lot of big response to answer Carla's question in that regard. So thank you. I'd like to introduce Dr. Chad Higgins, the superintendent of the Mays School District. Much like Mr. Case, he has experience in smaller school district and now a larger school district. So Dr. Higgins, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Gary. I'm Chad Higgins. I'm a superintendent in Mays. Mays, for those of you not familiar with our community, we are a suburb of Wichita, about 7,700 students on the northwest corner of Wichita. We are the densest school district in the state. We have 42.5 square miles and again, 7,700 students. So a lot of homes. We have low SES population, low minority population. We're one of the faster growing districts in the state. Right now we're constructing 2 new intermediate schools that will open in August. One will be built to hold 1,000 5th and 6th graders, and one will be built to hold about 750 5th and 6th graders. We have 5 elementary schools that hold between, in a normal year, hold between 600 and 700 students each, K-5. Those are all K-5 buildings. Our current middle schools are 6-8 buildings, and they hold, well, one has about 750 students, and the other one has over 900 students. Actually, it has almost 1,000 students, and it's built for 900. So, and then we have 2 high schools. One's supposed to hold 2,000, the other's supposed to hold 1,000, and they both have about 1,100 students right now. So when construction is complete, we'll move our 6th graders out of the middle school and our 5th graders out of the elementary, and then create another stage for students at the 5th and 6th grade level. So we're very blessed. We have excellent technology, great broadband, one-to-one K through 12. All students have. We send laptops home anyway with middle and high school students. So the transition last spring wasn't terribly challenging. We did have and identified individually phone calls and emails to families that needed hotspots and internet. Our foundation is very supportive, and they bought hotspots for families that needed them, even staff, where we had 2 or 3 teachers in the same household. I guess that's really only in one household where we have 3 teachers in the same place, but where teaching remotely on 3 teachers' laptops was a burden. But we're also blessed that we have a very successful virtual school. Mays Virtual Prep is about 400 students strong, has been operational for about 10 years now. So they've been a blessing as well. Their experience and staff to help us get through the spring and then help prepare us for this fall has been a benefit that not everybody has. So, so that's a little bit about our district. In May, once we started winding down the continuous learning plan, we put a team together. Our reopening initiative is called Together for Tomorrow, or T for T. We rolled it out the process, and I can drop a link to that plan in the chat if you want me to, but we really committed to this. We ended up having nearly 130 staff members involved in this process and this work. And I'm going to keep looking over because I have the diagram still on my whiteboard in my office, but really seven teams that worked independently and then collaboratively throughout the summer. We had a elementary, a middle, and a high school teaching and learning team, and we invested early in the work of competency-based learning. We felt like we really had to get aligned if we were going to have kids moving in and out of remote and in-person learning, whether it was because we built a system for that or we had to because of cases. And then we put an operations team together, which had several subcommittees: food service, transportation, health and safety, and others. And then we had a social and emotional learning team led by counselors and teachers, social workers. We had a professional learning team that was put together to plan for all of the training that needed to take place once we got closer to the school year. And then we had another team called Supporting All Learners. These were those that were working with special needs students, 504s. And all of these teams worked, again, separate and then together. All of the plans were in a platform, in a place in Google where they could access and see and comment. And so we really went in and out of this group. And then we had a whole other group of teachers, staff members, administrators who couldn't commit to being on a committee, but did want to help, did not want to, I'll say be surprised at the end, but wanted to participate, just weren't able to fully engage for one reason or another. We called them critical reviewers. And so when we get to a certain phase in the planning process, we'd put it all together and then send it to them. And then they could see it with fresh eyes, kick back questions, challenges, issues, and those kinds of things. So we felt like that work helped us not have to retool too many things once we got to the point where we could roll it out to the board. So early July, we felt like we had a plan put together, and I feel like we were as far along. Again, I'm not criticizing anybody at all. I just felt like we made a lot of progress early with all of the things that we did. And then by July 13th, we were able to roll out and start to introduce our draft plan. That wasn't too many days before the governor said we should start school after Labor Day, which was a conversation that took place among our team members and so forth. But like a lot of things we do, I feel, one thing I feel the best about our school district and our teams, our staff leadership teams, are that we're very collaborative. My second year in the district, we had to draw boundary lines between middle and high schools, which can be a contentious issue. It felt like that went really well, but it didn't end up like I would have done it. But it ended up better than I would have done it because of the process we used. We had a bond issue get passed last year, and it wasn't at all what I and our operations guy went into with, but it was way better than we would have put together ourselves, how it ended up and how well it was supported by our community. So I would say this is the same thing. I was a little surprised when the teams came back at the secondary level with this hybrid model, this only half of the students in school at a time. Of course, I unfortunately have to play politics sometimes in this business. And so how well that's going to go over in any community that kids aren't in school every day. But they made a case for it. And we put it all together and put it in front of our board in July and then addressed the questions and the subsequent fallout and then we're able to put a plan together. And as many challenges as we had, our staff, I felt like overall embraced it very well. A week in our school right now looks like today's our very first, what we call remote learning day for all students. So we don't have a student in the buildings today. Our elementary, all students who chose. So I guess let me go back out. We have two separate options for remote learners. Any family that chose remote learning, we created an opportunity that was a little more self-paced. There were still daily connections. We still have our virtual teachers working with those folks, but they have a little more support at home potentially and want to move at their own pace. Let's say not at their own pace. They're moving on our pace, but has a little more flexibility to it. Then we have a remote rigorous plan, which is our teachers, our normal teachers in a remote environment working with our students who didn't feel safe coming to school. Overall, our remote learners make up about 12% of our student population right now. So the rest of those folks rest of our kids are in person. At the elementary, at the K-5 level, every student 4 days a week, and Wednesdays are remote learning. So our teachers are connecting with those kids, having some synchronous instruction during the day when possible. But the philosophy behind this is because it's temporary, at least initially it's temporary. So our teachers and our students and our families can practice remote learning. So we can get used to how those tools work, how to connect, how to then get some I guess real feedback. When the students come back tomorrow, we can connect the next couple of days with families and then retool a little bit for the next remote learning day. So in what we believe is a likely event of all students having to learn remotely at some point during the school year, we feel like we'll be well prepared for that. But if our numbers in our county continue to click down and we move into full in-person for all students at some point, we don't feel like we'll have missed a beat. We'll have learned some new tricks of the trade. So now, right now, our secondary students, our 5-8 and our 9-12, our 6-8 and our 9-12 are on alternating days. So we have half of our kids on Monday and they come back on Thursday. The other halves go to school on Tuesday and Friday, and then they're all remote Wednesday. So our secondary students are all 2 days a week. Right now, tentatively, we're looking at the first quarter, and then we'll get away from remote Wednesdays. We'll have enough experience with that practice, and then can transition with the secondary students to alternate 2 days, 3 days a week with them. Again, if our numbers continue to move in the right direction, it's possible we'll move all of our secondary students back into the buildings. Again, the problem with us is moving all of our students, even if remote learners stay in the remote environment. We're still going to have secondary schools that are at or near capacity, which is a challenge. And really why we went with the hybrid was you can't transition secondary students safely because of the scheduling, and social distancing is nearly impossible for the older kids. And it is for the elementary kids too, except our class sizes at elementaries right now with our current enrollment in this hybrid model is between 15 and 19 in an elementary classroom. And most of our elementary classrooms are decent sized. So that's a day in the life. Right now, we've had great support from our school board. I felt like really proceed with caution, provide as much support. Our board has tremendous respect for and appreciation for our staff to be able to do whatever they need to do to take care of our kids. And all, I say, to a person as a board member, very strong on masks. We say if you don't want to wear a mask in school, we have this remote learning environment for you. And we've done that even with our adults. We'll make every accommodation possible, but potentially work in a remote environment or a separate environment, because masks aren't about my safety, they're about everybody else's safety. And we have a lot of events and activities in our schools, whether it's a lockdown or whatever thing may happen, and we're always communicating that safety is our top priority. And I said, if we don't require masks, how can we keep saying that safety is our top priority? So
Dr. Higgins, I do appreciate what you have said. There is a question here that maybe you can answer.
okay.
And I do appreciate board members that have been answering this question on chat, because it's probably more valuable. But Chad, in your district, how are you handling the online time for elementary students? Is it synchronous, happening at the same time as it's happening with the on-site learners? Are you working with small groups? And if you can't answer that, that's perfectly fine. We're getting some responses, but how's that happening in Mays?
So the remote learners, the ones that are full remote, they're connected with those remote teachers. That's completely separate from our teachers in the building. And they have synchronous times. So we use Seesaw as a tool and some other platforms that are being used. So on today's remote learning day, we've worked with our rec and our YMCA who are hosting latchkey programs, and we've kind of helped build a schedule so they have chunks of day where they can be connected, where they can be reading, where they can be in physical activity and those kinds of things. So we've, I think, made that schedule public are available to all of our homes, so they kind of have an idea of what to do. But we know we have some families that are in a child care situation where they don't have that same kind of flexibility, and our teachers are still working to connect with them, but the synchronous part will be clearly a challenge.
Thank you, Chad. We'll keep moving on here to make sure we give Dr. Proctor proper time. So we do appreciate the information we've heard so far. Thank you, board members, for responding to each other's questions. Very, very helpful. Dr. Ben Proctor and Mr. Lane Frick, the board member, they're both from Heston. So Dr. Proctor, if we give you the time that you need to have to explain to our guests.
Okay, Will. First of all, really appreciate the opportunity to be involved in the conversation. Heston, is quite a bit different than Emporia and Mays as far as size goes, and I imagine that smaller districts have some advantages right now over larger districts. I haven't led a large district during a pandemic, but some flexibility that we have may not exist quite to the same degree as larger districts. We have anywhere between 800 and 850 students year to year. We're about 820 for this year. Pretty low poverty. We're under 30% free and reduced and under 20% free. So we have some advantages there as far as just access that our students and families have. We learned in the spring that the majority of our folks have reliable internet service, and we provide one-to-one devices as well. So technology really hasn't been a big concern for us. But I'll just jump right into kind of how we made decisions to go with the hybrid model that we ended up with. That's a little bit unique. I don't know that I'd recommend this, but we had 8 total community meetings this summer. Not all dealing with back to school, but the majority of them were, where we brought people in if they wanted to come in, and then we had record Zoom attendance as well during those community meetings. And we were able to, I think, right away identify that our parents, when we talked about hybrid, this concept that they weren't familiar with, and we started looking at options, they didn't like any of the options unless it was their kids were going to school every day, all day. And so our starting point became, how do we provide a safe environment where we can implement mitigation and safety strategies, but still get kids, especially our K-8 students, in school every day. And that took a lot of, it wasn't me, it was kind of like Dr. Higgins mentioned, we had a lot of the same types of structures in place with teacher teams and operational teams. And we reached out really early on to churches and other facilities that we have in our community to see what kind of off-site attendance centers we could establish so that we could get kids spread out the way we want to, but still provide daily instruction for kids on site and give them that option. We provided the option of remote as well. And initially, as we were engaged in those community meetings and we were surveying our families, we saw a pretty substantial number of people saying they were going to start at least in a remote learning environment. We were up to anticipating about 20%. And after the dust settled, we're at just under 5% that have actually started in remote learning in Heston. So we saw that number decline quite a bit. And the majority of people that I talked to say because of the hybrid model that we implemented, it made them feel more comfortable to go ahead and send their kids, which was good for us. Because again, we felt like getting kids to school every day if we could would be ideal. But we have, just like most districts, we have a tiered gating criteria that we use. It's got 4 different tiers. It's color coded, and it's green, yellow, orange, and red. And we decided to start in yellow, and it was collaborating with our county health department, and as well as an advisory group that we have here locally in Heston that we've used. And in yellow, our K-4, which is our elementary school, they're on site every day in person and pretty much conducting school as we normally would, with our mitigation strategies in place that include mask wearing and all the fundamental things that we do. Our 5-8 is where it gets kind of interesting. We have our 5-8 building is our middle school, and we're keeping our 5th and 6th graders on site. So they go to the middle school every day and they have school pretty much like normal, but we're moving our 7th and 8th grade over to a conference center that we have, Crosswind Conference Center, that's just east of town. We bus them over there every day, and we've got a building for 8th graders and a building for 7th graders. And that allows us to use larger spaces at our middle school for our 5th and 6th graders, and large spaces at Crosswind for our 7th and 8th graders. And it's been a huge logistical challenge leading up to the school year. And we utilized about 3 additional weeks with staff as they prepared for the hybrid model and what we'd be doing. And we needed every day of those 3 weeks to do it. We did a lot of upfront work before teachers reported, and then mobilized in mid-August, and then ended up starting on September 2nd. But we, from a food service perspective, from a transportation perspective, custodial, all those things, it took a lot of work up front. But as we've, had a chance now to implement for a couple of weeks, the value of getting kids in school every day, all day, K-8, it's definitely outweighed the negatives of having to do a lot of upfront work and work through those logistical challenges. So in talking to teachers, I think they've settled in over there. They've had to pack up and move some things. Internet was an issue because it's in a rural area that uses a pretty poor internet service already. So we've utilized mobile hotspots and things like that to get internet service. So overall, it's worked really well. And our high school, 9-12, because you don't have the custodial issues, because you have more mobility with kids who can drive and those types of things, we've been on an AM/PM hybrid at the high school. So we have half of our kids attend in the morning, half of our kids attend in the afternoon, and have a schedule set up to where it repeats what we do in the morning, then repeats in the afternoon. It's our school colors are red and black, so we call them red and black days. We're able to reduce class sizes in half, essentially. And in a district our size, we're, for the most part, under 10 kids per classroom at the high school. And that's also gone really well. The biggest concern I hear from teachers with that model is just the repetitiveness of the day. Takes a little bit of an adjustment, but I think they're getting used to that now. So that's been our approach. If we were to tighten our restrictions, if we were to move to orange, we also have the ability to move 2 of our grade levels at the elementary offsite. We would do the exact same thing we're doing with 7th and 8th grade. We would move our 2nd graders to a local church, and we've had tremendous response from our churches in our community who've all said every facility that has enough space has said you can use, during the week, anytime you need us, you can use us. And so if we do go to orange, our 2nd graders would go to an offsite, our 4th graders would go to an offsite, and that way we can continue to provide service every day to all kids. So it's been a whole of community approach. It's been fun to see that element. Right now we're moving in a positive direction as far as our numbers go. So our challenge right now is determining, even though things are going very well, is it time to move back to green? Because our metrics say we're moving towards green. And so what we call it, we're putting families on alert right now that transition could occur here in a couple of weeks. It really doesn't disrupt K-8 because the parents are already dropping their kids off. They're already picking them up at the same time. But high school, it would be an adjustment where kids would, kids who have been going in at noon are going to have to get themselves up and get ready to go in the morning. But we are seeing positive trends, and working with county health and my advisory group, we feel like it's time to have that conversation, which also feels good. So that's been our approach. And I may let Lane, if he's able, kind of talk about the board perspective on that a little bit too.
Yeah, thanks, Ben, and great job explaining that. From the board's perspective, Ben and the administrative team has done just an outstanding job of communicating with the board and just taking this approach holistically and collaborating together. Like Mr. Proctor said, the community involvement in Heston has just blown us away. You know, the overwhelming response to just opening up facilities and allowing, you know, our students in has given us the flexibility to do things differently. And like Ben started, you know, we felt it very important, with safety being our top priority. Kind of the second piece of that is the importance of getting kids in school. And so if we could do that in a kind of a unique way, we're definitely open to that. So Ben and the administrative team has done a great job. One thing that Ben, you know, maybe didn't hit on with just kind of our trending, that Ben has really taken an approach, as well as our administrators, of we don't want to jump back and forth between green and yellow and cause confusion and cause, you know, an upheaval of schedules and so forth. So, you know, Ben mentioned we are trending green, and that advisory team with healthcare professionals involved in getting their perspective on, you know, what's going on in our community, in our county, so that we can do a really great job of communicating with parents and families to prep them for a possible change in their schedule. So we've been very clear up front. I feel that we don't want to go from green to yellow and yellow to green, or orange or red, or, you know, whatever that may be, often. So even though our gating criteria is basically all green, we haven't made that switch to green because of the reasons, you know, Ben just spoke on.
Thank you, Lane. Really appreciate your insights that you're giving us as a board member. We do have a question that I want to make sure Mr. Blasi has an opportunity. I have noticed there have been some questions, but the best responses have really come from board members. So feel free to answer the best you can for each other. And the question for Mr. Blasi has to do with contact tracing. What information are you keeping in your schools? And Sam may be able to give us some legal perspective to that.
Right, so there's really two parts to this question. Is sort of what documentation are individual districts keeping concerning cases, and what information you're making publicly available. And then the second is sort of how we handle those positive cases when we get them. So the first and most important thing I want you to know is that if you are keeping actual records of this information, meaning you are writing it down with sort of names, grades, schools, buildings, things like that, that is potentially a discoverable document under the CORA, with probably some redacting, but it will be a school record that can be discovered under the CORA. So you need to be aware that if you're keeping that sort of information in any sort of recorded form, that someone can request that information. Now, for some districts, that might be enough to not keep a log, as it were, of that information. But others might make this information readily available on their websites or through their social media, that, oh, we've had one case in our elementary, we've had 2 cases at our high school, things like that. It is going to be an individual decision for the district and the board on how they want to keep that information, or if they want to keep that information. Now, this should not be confused with the responsibility of the district to report positive cases to your county health agent. That is a requirement that you have to do by state law and by state regulation. So you're going to have to do that. And that's going to be information of the name of the student, address of the student or staff member, things like that, so that the county health agency can contact them if they haven't done so already. Now, very, very briefly, there are a lot of county health commissions that are trying to get school districts to do all of the contact tracing for them. So it's providing the county health agency with all of the students that this student or staff member may have been in contact with. While it is legally permissible to disclose directory information for those students and staff members to your county health agent, I would strongly caution you against that, because it is not our job as a school district to do the county health commission's job for them. It is also potentially us incurring some additional liabilities by accidentally disclosing information that we should not have. So keep that in mind when you're making that decision. Ultimately, it is a decision that the board can make, but you need to be careful and think through what that decision is going to mean for your individual districts. So that is for providing information about contact tracing to the county health. Now, the big question is, what information do we as a district provide to our public, our parents, other students concerning positive cases? The rule of thumb here is that not everyone is entitled to all information. Certainly those students and those staff members who are in close proximity to positive cases need to be alerted that there was a positive case and they could have been exposed. Also a list of sort of what symptoms there are and contact information for the county health agency, letting them know that you may be contacted if you haven't been contacted already to consider quarantine or to order to be quarantined. Then as we get a little bit further out, the amount and the detail of information that we provide to those individuals gets less specific and less specific. So if we're talking about at a building level, we report, okay, we have had one positive case in the building. Please keep in mind that these are the symptoms. If you're a student or as a faculty member, if you are exhibiting these symptoms, please contact county health and contact building administration so that we can address these issues. At a district level, you may not even need to report a case in any specific detail. You can just say, this building had a positive case.
Sam, we have another question that I want to make sure we get to. We're getting to the nub of time here. We've had some questions from board members that actually their response would be better than any of former superintendents on here or superintendents about are there any boards of education administrative that have plans on how to alleviate some of the stress that these teachers are having. We also have a superintendent as a guest today, not a special guest, Patrick, but we're sure glad you're here, that has a question, and I'll give this to our three special guests. May not be something you're doing that maybe you've heard in your superintendent circles. If a teacher is teaching both in-class students and remote learners, is anyone compensating these teachers above their normal salary? And if you are, how are you coming up with the system to do that? So I'll leave that open to the first superintendent that's willing to give that a try.
Whatever you decide to do compensation wise, it better fall within your negotiated agreement, or you better sit down at the negotiations table.
Kevin or Ben?
I agree with Chad. We're not doing any additional compensation.
Ben, how about you?
No, we aren't either. No.
Okay. All right. So we are having an absolutely a great session. We've had some wonderful questions. Superintendents, thank you for great information. Mr. Frick, really appreciate your service and your assistance to the other board members that have volunteered to come here on their own. Your responses, board members, are the power of this. Thank you for your responses to your colleagues' questions. Next week, we will have a guest from the Kansas Corporation Commission who is starting a program on trying to allow families to become more connected, because we're finding out there's about an estimate of 48,000 students around the state that do not have connectivity, and that is obviously becoming an issue. So we hope to see you next Wednesday at noon. The three superintendents and board members, thank you so much, and hope to see you again next week. So thank you.